welcome to Humanize IT podcast. I should do a better intro, you're one place for, I've got an intro that comes on that I think I built like 3 years ago, but it's not cheesy enough. I did it for those of you listening. I did shorten up the outro after my wife's like, "Can you please just shorten the outro?" Because she's like a serial podcast listener, and so that minute outro I had was just killing her. I think it's a pretty song though. Anyways, but yeah, so we're
times, man. You have some good jam coming into it.
Maybe I'll get a new song or something coming up, a new intro that's a little bit more your one spot for all advice, MSP related. Just could put on a good radio. So this month, as my wife reminded me this morning, is Mental Health Awareness Month. And for those of you who don't know, my wife is a mental health pharmacist. So we're going to have her on later on this month to kind of talk about maybe some suicide awareness, some mental health tricks that she talks about with her patients and staff. So today, Skip and I are going to talk about the importance of mental health in IT. I was a good engineer. I mean, I wasn't the best, but I was good. But I turned into an absolutely crappy engineer one year after I adopted 4 kids in a year. So that drained me. There was a major migration going on. I mean, a massive migration going on, and I was one of the go-to guys for it. So there was an 80-hour week starting to happen over and over and over again. And so by about month 6 of this, I was just trash. I was making lots of mistakes, really poor decisions that I would never make. And I just kept making more and more mistakes. And then I got a new boss that year and he kept writing me up. And I'm like, what is going on? And it turned out, for those longtime listeners here, it turned out I was burning out and I was sleep deprived.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting terminated from that position, and rightfully so. I was a terrible employee at the time, but I was a 5-star employee who went from a 5-star to 0 pretty much in 12 months. Why? Sleep deprivation, stress, anxiety just turned me into a terrible employee. And so when I got done, they let me go 2 days before Christmas. That's the kind of boss this was. Anyways, I slept for 14 hours a day for 2 weeks. And you ask Andrea, my wife, about this, she'd be like, it wasn't fun for any of us during that year. I was snippy. I was not patient. I was not kind. And when I got the end of those 2 weeks, I was I felt so much better. I had forgotten, when you have a long sickness for 2 weeks, and you're you forget what it's like to be healthy, or maybe a 6-month cough that just won't go away. That's the way I felt. I basically slept all the way through Christmas season until January. And it turned out there was a bunch of politics that happened while I was gone, because we were wait a minute, you got rid of Adam? And then a whole bunch of things went down with leadership. And you could probably come back if you want. No, I'm done.
Yeah.
And so, but that got me thinking, how many times do managers not see, or even an employee not recognize, that they're struggling mentally, that they need help? And I know in the corporate world, we can afford to do employee assistance programs where you can recognize an employee who's struggling with postpartum depression or with anxiety or stress. And you can say, hey, look, here's a free resource for you to take advantage of, because we care about you and we want you to get better because you're a valuable employee to us. With a small business, it's a little harder, to get those EAP programs going. So how do you help an engineer or somebody who is showing these signs of burnout? So I want to highlight that this month. So Skip, you had some things you wanted to say on that?
Well, and I've been awful quiet in this first part. And, as I've been thinking about that, I think my silence kind of represents a lot of small business owners.
Yeah.
Right. So me growing up kind of small town out in West Texas, mental health wasn't a big topic, coming up. You just took care of yourself, right? Maybe that old cowboy mentality or whatever.
Yeah. Shake it off, rub some dirt in it.
Yeah, rub some dirt on it. and then going into, full-time work, sometimes those stressful positions, even then I just thought, oh, you just work harder, you just suck it up, and you just keep going on. You know in West Texas, we did away with cowboys a long time ago and we replaced them with welders. Right? And I just always had this vision of this grizzly, guy got little burn marks all over him from welding for decades, and you just didn't talk about mental health. You didn't. You
Yep.
just dealt with it. However, and I think in the small business world, like you said, without some of the big corporate benefits, it is a real struggle. And so corporate owners, or I'm sorry, small business owners, they may recognize some of these issues, but they don't have a lot of resources to deal with them.
Yeah.
And
How do I
and
help
you
my
need to
employee
talk
who's
about it.
struggling?
Yeah, you need to do that, because inevitably you will all come upon an employee at some point who is clearly dealing with some mental health issues. And if you aren't prepared for it, then you really find yourself scrambling. How
Yep.
do you take care of your business, but also be a decent human being and take care of the person that is, walking into your business every day? That could be a real challenge.
Yeah. And our generation kind of tend, like the Gen Xers, right? It's very much we tend to ignore our mental health, especially the boomers of before us. It's just like, oh, you're sad, suck it up, deal with it.
Yep.
You know, which has led to some significant social issues here today, as we've got a lot of people dealing with anxiety and mental issues and nowhere to turn.
Yep.
And so, what we want to do is we want to create an environment where it's okay to have an off day. Like, I woke up this morning and I was like, man, I'm really tired. My son was in the ER last night. He took a tight turn on his scooter, and so he's got a fracture in his wrist. He's fine. But and then yesterday I was working hard all day long. So it was just like nonstop yesterday, all the way until like 8:30, 9 o'clock, when I finally got back to the house. And then I tried to relax for a bit, couldn't turn my brain off. And so I stayed up too late last night. And I wake up this morning, I'm like, man, I'm just dragging. So previous Adam would just stick it through. This Adam,
Yeah.
like, okay, you know what? I've got a 2 hour window here after this recording, and I'm going to just let my my brain relax,
Mhm.
take some Sudafed, let my sinuses get drained, and just get some sunlight. And that's okay. And I know a lot of you like are working jobs where you're seeing you're going on site. You're doing something. Find a time to do a mental break, even if it's like between two sites. Stop by a park and stare at the water for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just
Something.
let your brain stop. Put your phone away and just let your brain stop for just a second and do a self check. Like, where am I? How am I doing? Do I need to ask my boss for some time? Is, like, hey, look, I'm struggling here. And struggle in the IT industry, if just my own stories is, I keep making mistakes. I feel like my to-do list is not ever getting smaller. It keeps getting bigger. I'm not managing my time well. And you feel that pressure on you, like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this.
Yeah.
So that's how it looks for me. And if you're feeling like that, like you're just behind, and like there's no end to it, and you're just tired of doing the same stuff every day, you're probably mentally exhausted. You
Hmm.
just There's things you can do, like sleep is great. Recharge your
Yeah.
batteries. If you're an extrovert, going out to a party or finding some friends and just having an evening and recharge. If you're an introvert, it's going to be find a quiet place and stare at the water, read a
Mhm.
book.
Yep.
Do these things that recharge you and don't feel guilty about it. And then as a manager,
That's really
look at that
important.
employee and say, do I want to lose this employee? Is it better for me to give them a week off where they can recharge and come
Yep.
back and be twice to 3 times as effective? Or should I do I need to keep pushing?
Yep.
You got
Well,
to ask yourself that question.
yes, and it's okay to recognize those issues. I think that's one of the challenges I struggled with was being able to identify that and then be okay that, hey, I'm struggling right now, and we got to kind of break the ice on it or something somewhere where it's okay to say, hey, I need a mental health day. That was I remember the first time I ever heard that, and I thought that's just that's lame. But over
Lame.
the years, I was like, no, that's actually a pretty good thing. Sometimes you do just need that break, and
Yep.
it's hard because we do have this to-do list, and it's pressing, and the tickets keep coming in, and the phone keeps going off, and we're just more and more and more. But you get to the point where you're very ineffective, and you've got to sometimes take a break, and
Yep.
to recognize that, to deal with it appropriately. It's hard to do it in the moment. Right? So,
Yeah.
For one bit of maybe sound advice from Skip. All right, plan ahead on this one, because if you wait until you have that employee that is really struggling, or even yourself, and you find that you're in this very, very difficult situation, it is much harder to deal with it then than to plan ahead for it. So this is one of the things you need to find those resources. You do need to talk to your employees, talk to your staff, just your teammates. Hey, this is things that are coming up. These are challenges. This is going to come around. We see this seasonally. Christmas comes around. Thanksgiving, the holidays, the family, the stress, all of that really hits people sometimes. And now would be a good time to start planning ahead for that. Find the resources, get things lined up so that people know, hey, if you need some help, it's available, and it's okay. We get sick. You come down with the flu, and people say, hey, don't come to work. I don't want you here. But it's similar issues with mental health. I mean, we need to recognize that, yes, this is an issue. We need to deal with it appropriately. And the first thing we can do is just start talking about it.
Yeah. And part of that is, I don't know what the term for it is. Maybe somebody out there knows, like permissive behavior. So when you see somebody else do something, that means it's okay for you to do it. And not necessarily true, but like mentally, that's how we see it. Like if you see one person do something, okay, yeah, I can do that too. And we see that culturally when you see somebody start doing so, that's how like fads start. But
Yeah.
you as a leader need to be open about your mental health as well, and say, I suffer like every February. Adam Walter gets hit hard by seasonal effectiveness. There's no light. You're stuck inside all the time. And I'm an outdoorsy guy. Like I like camping. I like being out in nature. And I like my video games, but I love being out in the nature. So in February when I'm locked in, I just got to make sure I've got to get some sunlight. And my office is down here in the basement where it's light controlled. I've got this little corner where I have very little light coming in, because it helps me like with a 3-point light, and it makes it a little bit, the sound is better down here for acoustics. But at the same time, like I can't see the sun. So I've got my daylight lamp over here that's kind of like the backlight, but it's also a daylight lamp. And then mid-morning I always go upstairs and I get some sun on the deck or near a good well-lit room. And that really helps me. And by talking about that, other people get permission to talk about what's not working for them or what works for them. And it becomes a more casual thing. So if you got tricks that you use as a leader to kind of keep yourself mentally stable, talk about that. Like bring it up this month with your staff and your stand-up. Like, look, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. Some of you aren't big on mental health awareness, but I just want to let you know, here's something that I did when I was a tech that really kept me like centered. And it could be like, I got ice cream on Wednesdays at my favorite ice cream place in between 2 jobs. That was my thing. Or I really enjoyed stopping by the lake at this particular park. And just that's where I had my lunch.
Yeah.
I could watch the geese or the birds, and that was the way I centered myself. And like I had one guy one time tell me, he was like, whenever I'm really stressed, I sit down and I talk to my 5-year-old,
Yeah.
about their day. And it
Yeah.
really like refocuses you on what's important.
Well, and
So
understanding that people have differences. You mentioned in the basement. I worked for 3 years in the basement, and I loved it. That was just that was my cave down there. And yes, I got out plenty of times. I had to go to different locations, but I enjoyed it down there. And that's just the difference in people. You mentioned earlier introverts and extroverts. I remember one time when it really, really hit home for me. I'm very much an introvert, and the company I was working for, every year we did a big social, all right? And we had all sorts of people come in. It was a great event. I enjoyed it very much so, but it was a social. And for me, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And so it was at the business, at the office there, but it ran late in the evening, and it was probably 11 o'clock or so. And I'm just worn out. And so I go to my office. All right. Everything's still going on in the rest of the building. There are people all over the place, but I go hide in my office and I'm just sitting there, just relaxing. And one of the other guys came in. He was like, "Hey, what are you doing in here?" I was like, "I just need a few minutes." And I was kind of talking about the introvert extrovert deal, and I was kind of recharging for a little bit more. And talking to him, he's like, "I love this. The people is what gives me energy." And for me, even though I enjoyed that event, it was very draining. And so I needed a recharge from those. So just understanding that everybody deals with these things a little bit differently, that those differences are okay. Don't expect everyone to do the same thing you do.
I fully expect after a conference that I am not going to get a hold of Skip for like at least 48 hours. He's going to get on that plane and is going to ghost the world.
Absolutely. I enjoy going. I signed up. I'm going to be, at IT Nation Secure here a little bit. I'm looking forward to it. It's an exciting event, but yes, afterwards I will need some reach.
Yeah, but you won't have to work a booth this time. You get to actually just be a speaker and an attendee, so you can go hide if you want to.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So be permissive with your behavior. You don't have to be the stoic rock for everybody. You can be a little vulnerable and say, "Hey, look, this is how I keep my mental stability." Like I would go nuts if I did not have some people, it's their cigarette in the mid-afternoon. Like there is I have my beer on Friday. That's my Friday afternoon beer. And like it's whatever it is. Like I don't try not to do vices too much. Try to find something healthy and positive. I like to work out. I like to go do my rowing machine and do my weightlifting and get myself in shape. And that dopamine burst from working out is really good for me. But at the same time, like I also have a vice where like I love salty things. I love chips. I love crackers. And so sometimes instead I will get my comfort food. And if I do that too much, the belly starts getting big. I'm like, oh crap, now I need to get out to the gym more. I need to start eating healthier. And that also helps. So make sure you're not using bad habits to manage your mental health. Try to find good ones and get into a nice routine. But also recognize your employees. When you see an employee start making more and more mistakes, or maybe they're kind of getting cranky and showing a bit of attitude, sit down with them and say, "Hey, do you need some time? You don't seem like yourself recently, or do you need to talk about something?" And they might come out and say like, "Hey, my wife and I are going through a divorce, or my kid's been sick and I'm trying to balance both and I'm not having a good time with it." Like, I don't want to lose you as an employee. Let's try to find some time to balance this out, because you still need to work tickets. You still need to like keep a business running. If you're not working, you're not getting paid, right? But at the same time, the loss of an employee can cost you $20,000-$30,000 because you have to hire a new one, you have to train a new one, and now you're down. Having that week or that rebalance, that's going to save you money in the long term and make your employees more efficient. So
Yeah. Well, and the being able to prioritize these deals for many years, I just pushed on through, right? You got things to do, and that prioritizing my health, my mental health, it just kind of fell down on the list. And several years ago, we had an opportunity. I got reengaged, working out, getting in shape, and it changed things. And my family saw it as well. And so, not necessarily that life and work and all those other things changed, but I did, and my outlook on that. And so I realized that, yes, I got to the end of the day and there were still things that need to be done. And I had to squeeze in time for me to go work out. But in doing that, in moving my priorities up the list a little bit, it helped me accomplish more the rest of the time. So
yeah,
you can't just say, all right, we'll deal with all that when we're done with everything else. All right. You're not going to get done with everything else until you deal with your own priorities as well.
yeah. And it's too easy to say I'll rest when I'm dead. It's too easy to say I will. This weekend I'll take a rest. Like it's the day to day. It's the mini vacations. We have a whole podcast on the mini vacations, taking 15 minutes here and there, taking 2 hours here and there, building up a habit over 6 months of taking care of yourself and having those little breaks throughout the week that recenter you so that when finances are looking bad, you're like, okay, I'll still do a mental break. When you're seeing a really accelerated period in your business, okay, I'm still going to take a break because you'll feel like, oh, I'm accelerating. I need to work harder and take advantage of this swell. Like, yes, that is true, but you also don't want to make mistakes and kill that swell of business, that inflection point. But you have those mini breaks where you went out to the park, you went on walks, you did this thing that helped you recenter, and it becomes part of your routine rather than, oh, I'll take a vacation in a year. No, take little mini vacations today so that you can be more effective. And I know that when I was learning to program in the late 90s, the best advice I got from my professors was like, you cannot program for longer than 50 minutes in a segment. You need to take breaks. You can program for longer, but your returns are going to go down.
Yep.
And so anybody who codes or does things like that knows that they can do a marathon session, like 16 hours, no problem. But what also people notice is that you start to become less and less effective. You also notice that you make more mistakes. You feel like you're being productive, but then you wake up the next day and you look at your code and think, what was I thinking there? And then you fix your code and you go